this Season 1 Flurry build, you will never have to worry about energy at all, and this build can be played very smoothly from level 1 to level 100. Let's start with the skill tree, and we are going to include Puncture as our generator in the build because, in my opinion, that is the most versatile and complete generator in maybe the full Diablo, but for sure in the Rogue class. We are going to include the Enhanced Puncture obviously with it, and we are going to use Fundamental Puncture, which is going to make the enemy vulnerable for 2 seconds if we hit them with at least 2 blades of the 3 blade spread. This is going to combo together with our Flurry, namely the improved Flurry passive. Now, Fundamental Puncture is going to make one enemy vulnerable, and Improved Flurry is going to take that vulnerable and spread it onto all of the enemies that we are hitting with Flurry. At the beginning, this is only going to be a cone in front of us, but after some time, when you unlock the aspect of encircling blades, you will hit everyone around you in a circle, therefore making every enemy permanently vulnerable starting at level 6, because you will have access to Improved Flurry instantly, and having perma-vulnerable onto all of your targets is going to be an extreme game changer when it comes to leveling, because that is going to give you a huge multiplier, and that is going to speed up leveling tremendously. We are obviously maxing out Flurry, but what's also really important here is that we have a look at Enhanced Flurry, because Enhanced Flurry is going to restore up to 12% of your maximum life every time you are hitting a crowd-controlled or vulnerable enemy with your Flurry. Now, remember, we are making everything vulnerable all of the time with our Flurry, and Enhanced Flurry is then going to heal us all of the time that we are casting Flurry for up to 12% maximum life. So you can already see a great combo between just these 2 spells for the build, not only giving you huge survivability, but also giving you perma vulnerable, which is going to increase your damage during leveling immensely. Now, next up, we are going to use Sturdy, and since we have our Enhanced Flurry for the healing, we will not need our Siphoning Strikes during leveling. Then we will obviously include Shadow Step as our unstoppable in the build. We are going to use Enhanced Shadow Step to get to Disciplined Shadow Step, which is going to reduce the cooldown of Shadow Step quite heavily, and this will allow us to have way more unstoppables during combat, during fights, so you will not be perma-CC'd because you will most likely always have a Shadow Step ready, and that is going to be very helpful. Every Rogue build forever probably is going to run Weapon Mastery 3 out of 3 points, and we're going to include Dash with Enhanced Dash and Disciplined Dash during our only Codex phase. This will get changed later on. We will go through that in a second. But since we only have the Codex right now, we will take these 2 points as well, because the Disciplined Dash is going to slow everything that it hits. And if the targets are already slowed, it will daze them. And with our Shadow Slicer aspect, we are going to have a Shadow Clone that is also going to cast Dash, applying the daze instantly from the Disciplined Dash passive. Again, a very nice, extremely strong combo for the early game, because every time you are going to dash into a pack, you will slow them from your own dash, and your Shadow Slicer clone is going to recast your dash, therefore dazing everything in your path. Now, the daze is going to be really important, because whenever we are critically striking a dazed target from our dash, that one is going to be knocked down with the trick attacks here, and we will get 12% critical strike chance against knocked down enemies, which is going to be huge and very important for our damage. And on top of that, our evade cooldown is going to be reduced by 1 second whenever we daze an enemy. So we daze in with Shadow Slicer and our dash, and you will instantly have your evade cooldown reset. So this nice combo here, all of this lower part stuff combos very well together with the Shadow Slicer aspect. That is going to be a Codex aspect, as we are going through the Codex powers right now. You will have a very easy time to unlock this. You just need to run Twisted Hollow in Scosselt Glen, and then this whole cluster here synergizes extremely well together. Now, We will not really use any subterfuge skills here, but exploit and malice, which again will probably be used in every rogue build forever. And now comes the fun part. We are going to get to our imbuement skills. First and foremost, we are going to use precision imbuement. That is going to give us generally more crit chance. And then we are going to run shadow imbuement and max that out completely. You will have the option to kill the whole screen with your shadow imbuement very, very easily, especially if you are managing to get more than 5 points into there. But usually 4 points is going to be more than enough to kill the whole screen. That is going to be great. Now we're also going to use enhanced shadow imbuement. And since we don't need blended shadow imbuement for the vulnerable, because that is coming from our puncture plus flurry combo, we are going to use mixed shadow imbuement, which is going to amp up all the damage everybody takes from our shadow imbuement on top of that. Then we have our shadow crash, not so really because we like it, but we want to get to consuming shadows, which is going to when we are exploding the whole screen with shadow imbuement, which is going to just instantly fill our energy up completely. Now, during the leveling phase, you will most likely not be insanely strong against bosses, and they will slow you down a little bit. Therefore, we are going to use poison imbuement with enhanced poison imbuement and blended poison imbuement, which is going to help us with the bosses. The bosses are the only neutral point, I'd say, not even a negative point with this build, because Flurry in itself is an AoE spell, so it shouldn't really be that great in single target situations. But even up to level 100, while I was leveling this build, it was never a problem to kill a boss. And that was even with cold imbuement, which we get into later on. So I wasn't even using poison imbuement, and I was still killing bosses extremely easy. So don't worry about that. But since we are generally a little bit stronger during our only codex phase and the fights are taking a little bit longer, we want to use poison imbuement. As soon as the fights are going to be very, very short, let's say below 3 seconds, then you are going to change to cold imbuement, enhanced cold imbuement, and mixed cold imbuement, which is going to help you with your damage, with the corruption, but we will get into that later a little bit more in detail. Now, that's the only change that you really, really need to do, and you can always go back and forth. If you are very fast killing everything, you go for cold imbuement, enhanced cold imbuement, and mixed cold imbuement instead of poison imbuement. But for now, since we say we are only codex and we are rather slow, we are going to use poison imbuement, enhanced, and blended poison imbuement, because the fights are generally a bit longer than 3 seconds, around level 20 or 30, maybe just below level 40, we will use poison imbuement, and then you can always go back. Next up, we are going to use innovation to regenerate more energy, and we are going to use 1 point in adrenaline rush to get to haste, put 3 out of 3 points there, and then we are going to enable momentum. Momentum is going to help us with the increased energy regeneration to sustain way more flurry procs. It's also going to give us more movement speed and 20% damage reduction, which is insanely nice. Now, this build will not have a problem of triggering momentum because, as you remember, we will have the Shadow Slicer plus dash combo, which is going to daze everything, even without Mangler's aspect. So we will have everything dazed. You will have 3 stacks of momentum running constantly, and therefore will have 20% increased damage reduction, 30% increased energy regeneration, which is the main point during leveling, and 15% increased movement speed. Now, what's really important here is that you can change through the build's stages. So whenever you reach endgame, so let's say you reach World Tier 3, may that be with level 40 or may that be with level 46, doesn't really matter. As soon as you get here, you will have several choices. Again, this cold cluster here and the poison cluster here is always something that you can change back and forth. This means Whenever you think you are extremely fast, you will go with Cold Imbuement, Enhanced Cold Imbuement, Mixed Cold Imbuement, and Frigid Finesse. And whenever you feel a little bit slower, you will use Poison Imbuement, Enhanced Poison Imbuement, and Blended Poison Imbuement. This can be, for example, whenever you are entering a new world tier, I will suggest going with Poison, but as soon as you lived through that starting phase of a new world tier, which is usually a little bit harder, then you go and you change to Cold Imbuement with the aforementioned passives. You can click through this so you know what points to get rid of and which ones to use. As you can see, we will get rid of the dash stuff and use that here, but the link will be down in the description below for the build, also in the pinned comment. Check that out if you want. There's also one little thing that I want to, two more things that I want to go into, and namely that is momentum versus close quarters combat. So you gotta decide if you want to go momentum for the 20% increased damage reduction and the increased energy regeneration, which is mostly the main point for the build, or you want to go with more damage for close quarters combat. The problem is close quarters combat is going to not have any additional energy regeneration. So you will need a very well rolled Ravenous Ring, which is this one. It is going to be coming from the Codex, obviously in the min rolled version with 50% increased energy regeneration for 4 seconds. But if you find another one that is 70% or something, you can actually think about going close quarters combat when you have enough energy regeneration. If you really want to brute force close quarters combat for more damage, then you can easily get rid of the Vengeful Ring here and then just put an Umbral Ring on there. Even a low roll is going to help, and you will deal much more damage coming from close quarters combat compared to momentum. If you just want to, if you still want to use Vengeful Ring, the Vengeful aspect, and have a low rolled Ravenous Ring, or you never found an Umbral Ring, just keep going with momentum. That is going to be insanely fine, because you are not only going to be safer with the damage reduction, but also your energy regeneration is going to be boosted by 30%. Extremely nice here. Now, we will always be going through these 4 stages here. The end game is going to look like this, where we take the stuff with the Cold Imbuement. Again, later during world tiers, always go with the end game option right here. And every time you find Penitent Glyphs, instantly equip those, because then your Frigid Finesse is going to be active on all of the targets. That is going to be really, really helpful. And Cold Imbuement is going to be extremely boosted with the mixed Cold Imbuement in damage, together with your Corruption on the Gloves. So the Imbuement skill effect has a 40% increased potency against vulnerable target, and the Cold Imbuement skill is going to do 20% more damage against crowd-controlled enemies. That is going to synergize together and boost your damage tremendously here. Last but not least, the specialization here. I have gone with Inner Sight always, although it's also possible, and I suggest you try this out, because combo points is going to give you a huge amount of attack speed, which is going to be really, really nice. But if you want to, you can always swap from Inner Sight to combo points. Absolutely no problem. If you get rid of Inner Sight, make sure you remove the Ravenous Ring here, and you are going to use something way more offensive, namely Edgemasters, for the increased energy that you have for your combo points. But if you choose the Inner Sight or the non-combo point version, you will go with the Ravenous Ring on this slot right here. Since you will be progressing in the game, so will the build planner. These stages right here are going to help you out with this. The endgame section right here, for example, is going to unlock basically as soon as you start finding more high-level aspects, and whenever you are going to reach your exploit glyph, so your 3rd glyph socket, and that is going to change the 2nd point here on Flurry. Before, we had the improved Flurry, which spread the vulnerable onto everyone, which is now going to be covered by our exploit glyph in the first place. Therefore, we can get rid of this point and get advanced Flurry, which is going to give us a stun after evading through enemies. So it's really important to check out the other stages right here. Penitent Grief is basically the same as Endgame, it just has the Penitent Griefs here. And the Capstone boss is something that you should be using whenever you are fighting the boss. Not the dungeon, but the boss itself. And I suggest you click through all of this, especially because the aspects are going to change and these are going to be a little bit more advanced. That's why they are not on the only codex. And for this, there will be a link in the description and down in the pinned comment below. Next up, Paragon. And I will not go through all of this. You will be able to check all of this out in the build planner that will be linked down in the description and in the pinned comment. But we will quickly go through and talk over the most important stuff here. So we are starting out with the closer glyph in the first board. We will have exploit weakness combat. We have no witness exploit. We have tricks of the trade with turf, and we have cheap shot and diminish as our last board. Now, what's really important here is that we do not rely on our exploit glyph. Usually other builds really need the additional bonus from the exploit glyph or help for vulnerable. But as you remember, with our combo of puncture and flurry, we are going to make everything vulnerable anyway. Therefore, we will not need to level exploit glyph while we are not using it. So that's a very good thing. We will use it as our board 3, so you can rely on leveling exploit as soon as you reach your third glyph socket. So that is a very good thing, and we can first focus on leveling our cutthroat skill damage, and we can rely on getting our legendary node here. Usually builds don't have the luxury of doing so because they instantly want to get to the exploit glyph and also forego all the other stuff. But this build doesn't do that. This build basically has an exploit glyph built into the build itself. So therefore we can level other way more important stuff first. Now, we will go through all of this. You can all go through all of this again in the D4 planner, but it is a very good thing that you are not relying on your exploit glyph. Therefore, you can get some other stuff first before you reach exploit, because we still need it, obviously, for the boosted vulnerable damage. But that's a very good thing for this build, not relying on the exploit glyph. For aspects and gear for the only codex version, we want to go with might on our helmet, for protector on our chest, for corruption, which is going to boost our cold imbuement damage and all the other imbuement damage by quite a lot on the hands. We want cheats on our pants. For boots, we want Wind Striker's aspect, which is going to give us more movement speed after we critically strike. We want the encircling blades aspect on our two-handed crossbow always, because not only is that going to give us the option to hit everything around us, but also is going to boost the damage of our encircling blades. Then we go with the Shadow Slicer aspect on one of the swords, which is, if you remember, the dash synergy that is unlocking the whole cluster there. We're going to use Edgemaster on our sword. Then we are going to use, whenever we are using the inner sight version, we will use Ravenous Ring to boost our energy regeneration. We will use Vengeful Ring for more crit chance, and we will use Disobedience on our amulet to boost our defenses quite a lot. On hardcore, I think on softcore, you could definitely get away with using Disobedience somewhere else and using a more offensive one on the amulet. For example, you could definitely use Corruption, because that is going to help with the damage on our imbuements and is going to make the build a lot more offensive. But usually you want to have Disobedience at some point on your amulet to not be one-shot all the time. For the Season 1 mechanic Malignant Hearts, we want to have a very short barber in one of the slots. Short whenever we want to do nightmare dungeons and clear a lot of enemies. If we're fighting Uber Lilith, for example, we always would want to have a long barber, so 4 seconds. But this build is not really suited for Uber Lilith. This is just a leveling build. Therefore, ideally, you would aim for a very short barber to boost your damage in the short fights here. That would be great. Then we want to have the Caged Heart of Revenge, which is going to reduce the damage we're taking by 20%. We don't really care about the explosion. We just want the flat reduction of 20% damage here. So we need a blue socket on one of our jewelries. And then last but not least, we want to have Caged Heart of Tempting Fate, which is going to boost our damage tremendously, because at some point this is just a flat DPS gain whenever you socket this. If you don't have these ones, feel free to socket all the other stuff. All of them are great. these are just the best that you could have for the build. When it comes to rotation and combos, it's extremely important that you keep both of your imbuements on cooldown as much as possible, so they can start resetting itself, because at that time, whenever you press them, the cooldown is already running. Therefore, you will have much more uptime on your imbuements, which is going to be your main source of damage. So you can start your fights with shadow stepping or dashing into them, especially when you have a Ravager for your shadow step, so you have 2 of them, so you can get out of tricky situations always. And also, whenever you have your Shadow Slicer aspect, it's very important you start out with Dash. So whenever you are in a pack, you are going to use one of your imbuements, and then you are going to use Puncture if you still need the vulnerable from it. Or if you already have the exploit glyph unlocked, you are instantly going to use Flurry. Therefore, everything will become vulnerable and you will deal a crazy amount of damage. And then on the next pack, you are going to Shadow Step and dash into it, and then use the second imbuement that hasn't been used in the pack before. And this way you can cycle through all of these and will usually have one of the imbuements ready for the next pack. That is going to be the cycle or the little game that you play in between the packs. And as you can see, this is a very laid back approach to a build. It doesn't really require a lot of positioning or a lot of tricky combos to pull off. You just go in, explode everything with your Shadow Imbuement or your Imbuement plus Flurry combo, and then you go and defeat the next pack. For the pros and cons for this build, everything is going to be vulnerable, which is going to be very, very helpful. Starting at level 6, that is absolutely crazy, because that is going to help you with your damage and is going to speed up your leveling very easy. And it doesn't require any big combos to do so. It literally just requires you to press Puncture once and then Flurry, and everything that you hit with Flurry is going to be vulnerable. That is great for a leveling build. And also, as soon as you unlock the Encircling Blades aspect, which you can actually do very, very early on, starting at level 1 usually, if you would have access to your aspect at that time, and then you are going to have huge AoE damage, which is going to explode entire screens. Not only alone, but also Shadow Imbuement is going to help tremendously with exploding the whole screen. Now, the only con to this build is that the capstone bosses, since we have so low single target damage, are going to be a little bit harder than they are, for example, with Twisting Blades, because Twisting Blades is going to have very good single target damage compared to Flurry, which is generally an AoE spell. But this can be done still and has been done, because you will just switch to combo points. You will use Poison Trap, you will use Poison Imbuement. There is also a capstone boss section in the max roll planner, so that you can very easily swap to that build. You will do the dungeon with your normal spec, and then whenever you are in front of the capstone boss, you will switch to the spec that is in the max roll planner, and then you will have no hard time whatsoever at the capstone dungeon boss. I hope this guide was helpful to you. If you have any questions, I am answering every comment on my YouTube videos. So if you have something, just leave a comment. I will try to reply as soon as I can, and I will help you out. If you want to see me in action, there's also going to be a Twitch link where you can ask all of the questions and almost get live support, basically. That will be down in the pinned comment below. If you like content similar to this, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I'll see you next time.